One. And happy Sunday and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. We're back here again. It's May 17th. And the news continues to roll on. And as always, we come here to try to give you some information that's real. It's not just opinion. Obviously, sometimes it is our opinion, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Let me tell you who's going to be in with us today. As always, Val Atkinson is going to be in with us to talk all things politics. In our second segment, we went all the way to Dublin, Ireland to get David Owens. David Owens is the CEO of a company called Every Angle. He's working with the UK government and the Irish government, and also with the largest retail store in the UK and Ireland called Tesco. It's like Walmart. And he's doing some really innovative things to help detect COVID-19 related issues. And one he's calling physical distance control. We over here we're calling it social distancing, but over there they call it physical distance control, and we'll get an explanation of that. And then in our last segment we have Owens Daniels. He is a photographer from Winston-Salem, and he's going to be in with us to talk about a project that he did around COVID-19. He has people with their mask on, and then they hold up a message to the people of Winston-Salem, which is where he's from. I ran into him through North Carolina Policy Watch. We've had folks from North Carolina Policy Watch on the show before, and their website is really good. It's a good place to go and get information. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and bring in our normal guest, Val Atkinson. Val, welcome back to the deal.
Thank you so much, Ed. Glad to be here.
Well, Val, the weeks get weirder and weirder for me. I mean, all time seems to be just melted into one thing, and it's like a continuous Groundhog Day. But one thing that keeps changing is the number of people dead. We're at 90,000 people that are dead in the United States now. In this week, Barack Obama has started to speak out about the response from Donald Trump. Which is very unusual for a president to say anything about how a sitting president is handling, a crisis. Talk to me about why you think now Barack Obama is finally saying something, and what does that portend for the election that's coming up between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and just whether or not we're going to make any progress on COVID-19?
Well, one of the reasons, Ed, is that I believe Barack Obama feels that things have gotten to the point that it is necessary. He wanted things to be this way before he spoke. He didn't want things to be this way, but he didn't want to speak before they got to be as dire as they are. To show the country how critically important it is that he speaks. He is well aware, as you just mentioned, that presidents don't normally speak out on the handling of issues of their successors. And he used this opportunity to show the American people how critically important this is, that he would go ahead and say something about the handling of the COVID-19 crisis, even though presidents don't normally do this. That's one. Two, Barack Obama is well aware that his vice president, Joe Biden, is very, very likely to be the nominee, and he wants to do whatever he can to get a head start on supporting Joe Biden and revving up the base, the Democratic base, to make sure they get out and vote. So he's sort of killing two birds with one stone here, doing that. And I think he's doing a successful job at it right now. I believe that this is one of the reasons that you see Donald Trump going into his Obamagate bag.
I was going to bring that up. I was reluctant to, because I don't like the whole term, and it implies that there's some reality to this. But talk to us about Obamagate, or supposed Obamagate.
Well, I think this is a ruse by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has figured out that he has a way to manipulate and control the media, all the media. He started with his tweets. He was the first president that used tweets to communicate with the masses. And the only way that it works is that the media picks up on it and reports on it. Once he found out that they do that, he could control things. And regardless of how bad a situation gets, he uses a tweet to change the narrative, to change the subject matter, to talk about something else. And he gets the media to do that. So Donald Trump is in control of what is on the top page of the media. And if it's something that he doesn't like, he'll introduce a new topic. In steps Obamagate. One of the reporters asked him, well, what do you mean by Obamagate, Mr. President? What specific law are you accusing him of? He didn't have an answer.
Right.
And what he said was, well, you know what I'm talking about. And I can't remember not only a president, but anybody in a responsible position giving that as an answer when posed with the question. You know what I'm talking about. What that means to me is that he doesn't know what he's talking about. There's no specific charges.
Right.
What it does, it gets the media talking about it. It gives them less time to talk about testing and tracing. It gives them less time to talk about the Friday night massacres, all the people he's firing. It gives them less time to talk about all of those things that he'd rather not talk about.
Exactly.
So he's good at that. Remember, this guy was a real estate salesman. He ran a talk show on TV, The Apprentice, and he understands media marketing better than people give him credit for.
Yeah.
And he is manipulating the media right now. He knows what makes them tick. He knows what the faceless producers behind the cameras are doing and thinking. He knows how they make decisions. And he's using that he's actually controlling the media.
Well, Val, I get all of that. And I think it's become abundantly clear that he lives his life through Twitter and, sort of throwing out conspiracies and all that stuff. But it's a really dangerous game because people are dying. As I mentioned, we're at the 90,000 mark. There's no country even close to where we are right now. And the number is going to continue to go up because we've seen spikes in North Carolina, which had been doing very well. But we've seen these protesters go out and demand that North Carolina open back up. But we've seen it in Virginia. We've seen it in Florida. And the most starkest one I think I can think of is Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, the Supreme Court there said that the governor did not have the ability to have a generalized shutdown for everybody and that each county should do it. What are the implications? Have you seen any of those images from people in bars in Wisconsin the other night who were just leisurely going about their business, and what's going to happen as a result of that?
I have seen some of those strips on TV and the clips on specific programs. And my fear, Ed, is that if there are 2 or 3 people in those bars at any given time who are COVID-19 positive, and they spread that around, and because we don't have testing and because we don't have adequate tracing, they go right back and they spread it to their families, and then they spread it again. And we see a spike in the number of COVID cases that result in COVID deaths. I think it will become very challenging for our scientists, for our healthcare professionals to try to convince people at a later date that maybe it's safe, the water is fine, come on in. What this is going to do is going to prolong any type of economic recovery that is down the line, because people are going to use Wisconsin bar openings and those kinds of things as a sort of a battle whip to say, this is the reason I'm not going back to bars anytime soon.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what they're doing is hoping beyond hope that people can go back to the bars, and next week they can get out front and say, see, I don't have any symptoms and I'm good. Everybody come back to the bar. But the thing about it is a few crazies walking around with guns threatening COVID-19 with a gun, which you can't do. They can't decide for you and I, Ed, that we ought to go to a bar.
Right.
And that's where they don't know how to do this. They're trying to do it through public opinion. They're trying to do it through the media, trying to say it's all safe. You guys come back, because the bottom line behind all of this is money. They want these bars and restaurants to get back to the point that they are making considerable monies and they're playing their part in the overall economy. And it's going to take time, because this is a consumer-driven economy that we live in here in the United States of America. And consumers are not right now happy. They are not confident that they are safe mingling with other people. And that's what it's going to take is a degree of feeling safe before people go back. Not crazies with guns, not wearing masks, going into bars and stepping out and says, see, hey, I didn't fall over dead because I didn't have a mask on.
Yeah, I hear you. I want to remind the folks you're watching The Deal or listening to it, if you're listening to the podcast with Ed Clark, and our regular guest, Val Atkinson. He's a former professor of political science and media studies at North Carolina Central University. He's a columnist, author, you name it. His CV is too long to talk about, so we won't go into all of that. But I want to switch gears for a second. This is COVID related, but it's political, completely political. This week, North Carolina Senator Richard Burr was served a warrant, and the FBI went in and took his cell phones, ostensibly because of some insider trading information. I wrote a column on my blog this week, and the other thing that people don't consider about Richard Burr is that, one, he was not going to run again, but two, he had been critical of the president, even though he did not vote for impeachment. But there was a report that the committee that he chaired, and I say chaired because he no longer does, the Intelligence Committee, they are the people who know everything, the Gang of Eight, right? They know everything about what's going on. And his committee had said that the Russians did interfere in the election, and they did it to help Donald Trump. It's completely different narrative than what the president is trying to say. In addition to that, there was supposed to be some follow-on information, and now Richard Burr is not the chairman of that committee anymore, and now the FBI is involved. I'm cynical. I think it has to do with that, but is there any other reason why Richard Burr now is having his house raided and his phone taken, other than the fact he did sell stock, ahead of the COVID-19 thing?
It's going to be difficult to show or prove that it is something more than that. But I'm with you, Ed. There very well could be. Whether there is or is not something more, this is enough right now to be very weighty on Richard Burr and all those who support him. He has really dug a real big hole that he's in if he wanted to change his mind about running in 22, or if he just wanted to influence that election in some way or the other, to anoint somebody as his successor. Mm-hmm. Not going to be doing any of that sort of thing now. I think what his primary goal at this particular point is to keep him and his family safe. That is not from COVID-19 necessarily, but from the jail cell. He doesn't want to go to jail. He doesn't want things to turn so bad that they found out that he broke a law, that he committed a crime, and he's going to have to pay for it. That's his main concern right now, because there's a piece out, came out the other day that said that Richard Burr's brother-in-law also got rid of some stock during this time frame. So now there's a possibility here that there may have been some conversation between Burr's wife and her brother, or between Burr and his brother-in-law. At any point, they're hoping they may find a lead to that on his cell phone. So that was one of the reasons to let me just check any and everything. Let me have a no-knock warrant. We don't want him destroying any evidence before we get in there. And we know he knows everything about how to be secretive and who's doing what, because he's chair of the Intelligence Committee. So let's figure out a way how to get in and get what we want before he has a chance to get rid of it. I think this is critically important, because another thing, Ed, if I might, this sheds some light on how far GOP people will go to do whatever it is they want to do. And Richard Burr is a senator. There are 22 people running, senators that are Republicans that are running for re-election this year. It's a bad light right now. The junior senator from North Carolina, Senator Tillis, is in trouble. He's behind in the polls. And now the senior senator from North Carolina is being investigated. That's not the picture you want to paint when you're running into a general election in a few months. And also from a national level, when you're trying to hold on to the Senate and don't know what the outcome is going to be, to have this type of headline preceding whatever campaign strategy you may have. So it's difficult. They don't like it.
Yeah, well, they do have trouble, and I'm hoping to get Cal Cunningham, who's going to be running against Tom Tillis, and I've got some feelers out to their group, and hopefully within the next week or so we can have him on to talk about it, because it's really, the Democrats really, for this to work for them, is not only do they have to win the White House and maintain the House, but you really got to grab hold of the Senate, because Mitch McConnell has proven to be really hardline, and he has not let anything get past him, like the current bill that came out of the House just the other day for more recovery money. It is dead on arrival in the Senate, and I don't think it's going to get a vote because Mitch McConnell can do that. One of the things you did mention, Val, let me switch gears real quick about no-knock warrants, because in the news this week, and I want to talk about, some politics that are directly related to African Americans here, is we had been talking about the Ahmaud Arbery case down in Brunswick, Georgia. Last week, we were lucky to have the organizer of the protest down there. And if you haven't seen the interview, go back and look at that from last week to talk about what's going on in Brunswick. But then in Louisville, Breonna Taylor, who worked for the city of Louisville as EMT, there was a no-knock warrant. The police entered the house. Her current boyfriend shot at the police thinking they were intruders. He is now in jail under attempted murder charge. And then Breonna Taylor's been shot 8 times and is dead, and there were 20 bullets altogether, and it was a no-knock warrant. Can you tell me anything at all about what this says about how policing continues to take the lives of African Americans, but at the same time, I've seen video this week of a white man wielding an axe and chasing the police with it, and the police not even deploying the taser, and they try as hard as they can to do whatever they can to bring this person under control. The man had an axe coming at him, and Breonna Taylor was in her bed, and now she's dead.
It is just totally unbelievable, Ed, how people that are given the responsibility to protect and defend us are the very ones that we have to be real careful around. We have to watch what we say. You and I have sons that we had to sit down and talk with in a special kind of way, just as they were going out for their first drive unaccompanied. How to handle police if you're pulled over. If they're going out with the fellas at a ball game or something. How to handle the police if you're stopped and you're part of a crowd. White males and females don't have this conversation with their kids because it's not necessary. That should tell you something right there. And I watched a lot of TV, movies like Cops and things like that. And it's a totally different way these people handle suspects depending upon their race. I mean, the gruffness and the language that they use when they're talking to an African-American suspect. The civility and the calmness that they use when they're talking to a Caucasian suspect. It's almost as though the Caucasian suspect is one of them, or he's the son of one of their coworkers or whatever. It is amazingly, starkly different. And somebody ought to do a show, Ed. Maybe you and I can do this. Do a video of the back and forth between the way Black suspects are treated and handled and the way Caucasian suspects are treated and handled. The way they are talked to, man, everything is just totally different. And this comes from training. It comes from police culture. And it comes from the predisposition of race relation ideas that these law enforcement officials have before they become law enforcement officials. There are so many things that are impacting how they treat the people that they're supposed to be protecting and defending. It is impossible to change with just attacking one of those three things I just mentioned. It's got to be a holistic approach.
Yeah, still a lot of work to do, Val. And you know, again, we try to always, again, not just be critical, talk about solutions and things like that. But, you know, the reality is the white people who look at this show and the white people around America, a lot of times, you know, the onus is going to fall on them to make the changes. African Americans, we get in our car and drive, and you can be like Philando Castile, who had a concealed carry permit. Next thing you know, he's dead. I mean, he's trying to comply with the police. And so we continue to have these cases, and it's scary for a 55-year-old guy like me to go out and drive, as well as an 18-year-old. You don't know what's going to happen, and something has to be done. In the time we got left here, Val, like I always do, catch me up on what you're working on, and do you have a book review for this week, something that we need to be reading that you've been reading or taking a look at?
Yes, I do. The book that I'm reading, you know, I go back and read books all over again sometimes. They Don't Represent Us by Mr. Lessig. It's a wonderful book talking about the people that we send to Congress and why we send them, who's voting for whom. And it really gets down to the polarized country, the polarized politics that support our national government right now. We are more polarized now, Ed, than we've ever been before in our democratic politics since the Civil War. And I think he really puts his finger on the point to say, we know they don't represent us, so let's start sending some people to the government that represent us. More importantly, let's send some people there that represent all of us, instead of just a few of us. Now, my book that I'm working on is The Electoral College and the Black and Brown Vote, which is due out very shortly. It's finished. And thank you so much, Ed, for helping me out with that and penning the forward that I want people to read that you did. And that book is a great piece, a great compliment to your literary skills. So that's what I'm working on. Also doing a phone-in piece with Connections, our radio talk show Connections. We're taking calls. You can call and leave a message. You can call and ask a question. The text or voicemail number to do that is 919-656-5240. That number again, 919-656-5240. And you can call again and leave a voicemail, which we will play back on the air and deal with your question or comment. Or you can just send a text if you like. That'll be fine as well.
Well, one thing that brings up, I was noticing your shirt. If folks don't know, you're a Kappa. And one of the other things I know you've been working on is some voter education. I don't want to leave without talking about that, because you're right. The people who represent us are important, despite what some people are saying. It doesn't matter who it is. It does matter. Tell me what the Kappas are doing around voter education in North Carolina, and I presume they're doing it around the country.
Yes, well, I am active with the Durham alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi in Durham, North Carolina. And of course, we have a committee that's called the Voter Education and Participation Committee. And we've made some inroads with and partnered with Radio One of Raleigh, our managers who run our talk show Connections. And between the two, Radio One of Raleigh and the Bull City Kappas, as we call ourselves, we have a program called Voter Education and Participation. And of course, we're going to be heavy on the voter education piece now because of COVID-19 has disallowed us to have some of our town hall meetings that we had planned, some of our remote broadcasts that we had planned. So now we're going to make sure that we have an opportunity to have people like Derek Bowens, who is the director of the County Board of Elections for Durham County, and Damon Sircosta, who is the chair of the North Carolina State Board of Elections. We're having those two people on the air on a regular basis to inform us what our rights are in terms of voter registration and staying on the voter roll, making sure our names are not removed from the file. And any other questions people may have, they'll be there. The experts will be there to answer them. So that's what the voter education and participation program is going to be doing between now and November 3rd.
Well, that's a whole lot, but it needs to be done. And I'm glad the Kappas are involved in that and making sure that's done. Hang on with me for a second. Let's wrap this up. I need for folks to stay with us. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, David Owens, he's over in Dublin, Ireland. So there's a time difference. So I had to interview him last night. It's a very interesting interview about how they're handling COVID-19 in Ireland. And why this is important, I think you should stick around for this, is that in the United States, we've been complaining about everything. But in Ireland, they have had very few cases because they went to a lockdown even ahead of the UK, and they have very few cases, and people are following the rules, and they're using technology to help do it. And it's something that probably can't be done in the United States because it requires everything to be videotaped and to measure the distance between people and all that. But it's very interesting. They're not suffering the same death toll that we're suffering, but I think it's important for you to listen to it. So we'll be right back after this message.
Keep bouncing.
Welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark, and I'd like to thank Val Atkinson, as usual, for joining us in the first segment to talk all things political. But now I want to talk all things practical. COVID-19 is all around the world. And I promised you guys that I was going to go out and look for people in other places. So I went as far as I could go this week, and that's Dublin, Ireland. And I have a guest with me. His name is David Owens, and he's with a company called Every Angle. And David, welcome to the deal.
Thank you very much, Ed. Real pleasure to be here.
Well, a lot of people know I used to play rugby. I love darts, so I have a connection to Ireland that way. But the neighborhood I grew up in were a lot of expats from Ireland. We lived in a neighborhood that had folks that worked at different embassies and that kind of thing, and had a lot of friends from Ireland growing up. So have a little bit of an affinity for Ireland, and a lot of my rugby mates were from Ireland. But I want to talk serious today and talk about your company, Every Angle. I ran across you guys because I'm looking at ways that we can deal with COVID-19 that's not political, that's really practical, that gets at what we need to do. And one interesting thing you guys do is you can take a look at social, I guess we've been calling it social distancing, but physical distancing controls. And go ahead and tell me about your company, Every Angle, and some of the things that you guys are doing.
Great, yeah, thanks. So Every Angle, so we're a startup. We've been in business a little over 10 months, based in Dublin, Ireland. And what we do, we're a computer vision software company. So what that means is, in real practical terms, we work with one vendor, right? We work at Cisco, just call it out there, who've done some really, actually on the side, they've done some really good, I think, efforts and contributions towards trying to help people work from home and in these uncertain times. But what we do anyway is we build computer vision software applications for Cisco smart cameras. And so essentially what we do is we use the camera as a sensor to be able to detect various different things that are happening in spaces and places, whether that's people moving or objects, looking at light levels, looking at sounds, various different things like that, to be able to take all that information off the camera. So using API basically, and then analyzing and processing this and feeding it back to organizations either through alerts or intelligence dashboards or integrating with other systems. So a real simple example that is non-COVID related would be, for example, deploying a camera at the entrance to a retail store. And when an individual would walk in and maybe they're wearing some object that's concealing their face, like a motorcycle helmet or a face mask, and maybe they're carrying something like, a baseball bat, and that potentially could be, something that could pose a threat. What we're able to do is detect that there's a person, take an image, and use computer vision, which is basically deep learning, machine learning, analyze that and say, hey, there's a person there. They're wearing certain objects that don't look like they're a good fit in this particular context. And so we can use that to alert staff and customers to help try and keep them out of harm's way. And that's totally unrelated to COVID, but it's just to try and give a simple example for what we do, how we do it. Look, because we work exclusively with Cisco, one of the things that has happened is over the past 10 months, the reach that we have had, the visibility, we're working in every continent except Antarctica at the moment, and maybe the penguins will need help sometime soon, but we're not focused on that just yet. So that's kind of quick intro to who we are, what we do.
Well, I want to remind viewers and listeners that you're watching The Deal with Ed Clark, and have a very special guest all the way from Dublin, Ireland, David Owens with Every Angle. And we're talking about how to tackle the COVID-19 situation using technology. David, one of the things that, at least here on this side of the pond in America, a lot of people are wary of CCTV cameras and privacy concerns and those kind of things. When you start talking about using a camera, you said you're on every continent and you're doing things everywhere. What is it like when you talk to people about the fact that you're using images of people to collect this data on folks? What do people say about that?
folks say different things in different places, right?
Mhm.
Which is I'm not saying anything extraordinary there. I mean, and you're right. There's some interesting differences if you look at, between Europe, United States. You look at Asia Pac. There are some real differences there. If you look at Europe as an example, so we're based in Dublin, in Ireland. Our closest neighbour is the United Kingdom. And if you look in the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom has the highest density of CCTV camera per capita worldwide. It is the most surveilled country in the world. And people are quite relaxed about that there, surprisingly. And it's more surveilled than Russia or China. And so what you actually have in kind of rank order is you will have the UK, China, Russia, and then you tend to have United States, Northern America underneath that. And there's a different attitude. There's a different cultural attitude. But what I would say is I honestly find, I think that the point that we're getting to now and issues like COVID-19 have really drawn this out. You've periods in time where you have kind of social inertia, and it's very difficult to try and get people to change their ways or consider new technologies that challenge norms, if things seem to be working fine as they are. And what's interesting with COVID-19 is that people are very open and receptive to examining lots of varieties of different solutions that otherwise they might have discounted, say, on the basis of privacy reasons. Now, to be clear, we don't want to be cynical and take advantage of that. But by the same token, it does mean that people are open to considering these possibilities. Now, there's also an awful lot of misconception when it comes to even a term like facial recognition. And I understand that most people will talk around facial recognition as though it is one thing, it's one technology. And in fact, it's an umbrella term. And within facial recognition, you can have two main branches: facial analysis and facial comparison. And facial analysis, by definition, should always be anonymized. What you're doing is you're taking an image and you're actually measuring the distance on that image, say on a person's face, the distance between their ears, their eyes, their nose, and you're taking those coordinates to basically make a kind of data-driven guess. That person is male, they're female, their age range, are they happy or sad? And then it's those bits and bytes, those ones and zeros, that metadata that we call it, that gets stored in a database. It's not the person's face. It's not saying, hey, it's David Owens who's walked through this door. It's a male of an approximate age who appears to be happy or sad.
Right.
And so the vast majority of what we do, the vast majority, is entirely anonymous, records no personally identifiable information. And I think that once you explain that to people and they understand it, then people are very receptive to that. The challenge is whether people even give you the time to be able to give that explanation, or do they just discount it out of hand? And there's a lot of fear that comes from that. Where we do any form of facial recognition, we're quite clear on an ethical standpoint as to where we do facial recognition. And there's really only two scenarios. The first is where you're dealing with closed membership organizations. And these tend to be things like, there's a couple of real, high-end premium golf clubs, for example. And the members there, they want to be recognized. They want to be greeted by name, even if it's staff members' first day on the job, right? But they're consenting to that. They're signing up for that. They want that. And it's closed. It's not mass surveillance for members of the public. And then the second scenario is where you can demonstrate that you're clearly helping avoid loss of life or serious injury. And a classic case there would be for construction sites. So we can detect personal protective equipment. Is somebody wearing their hard hat or their high-vis vest? And that's anonymous. But then if you imagine if David Owens is somebody who works at heights on roofs or something like this, and I need to wear a harness, we can't detect every person to see if they're wearing a harness, because like 99 people out of 100 false positive. So how do you keep David Owens safe? How do you make sure David Owens is wearing his harness? Well, that's where you can use facial recognition. Understand, that's my role. And we actually had a customer who asked us to do this for them. And the reason is they had a workplace death in the previous 12 months where this happened. So if there's an ethical reason that people are bought into and they understand, that's fine. I think the danger, and I can relate to this, is if a system or platform is deployed for one purpose that's valid and people agree with, and then it is misused by creep to do other things. And I get that, and I think that's partly where you need to have regulation, and it's also partly where you have to deal with ethical companies and ethical brands who have a track record of having a culture amongst their people to promote these things.
Yeah, those are all good points. So you're listening to David Owens from, you can probably tell he's not from Raleigh, North Carolina. He's from Dublin, Ireland, and he's there right now. And he was kind enough to talk to us today about using technology for things like facial recognition and those kind of things. Let's talk specifically, though, about physical distance controls. And I know it's a fairly new product within your product line and the things that you guys offer. Talk to me about what you're offering people. Can you really tell me if I'm 2 meters from another person? And if you can, then what do I do with that information?
Great question. So what do we do with physical distance controls? Well, let me maybe just skip back 4 weeks in time. To where we started considering, was there anything we could do using computer vision to try and help? At that time, it was with what we would class as essential retail, right? So grocery chains, pharmacy, retail banking, post office, and so on. And the idea was, how can we help keep people safe, customers and staff? And so the first approach that we had to look at was to see, could we measure the distance between people? Whether that's 2 meters or 6.5 feet or whatever the guidance is, in the part of the world that you're from. And what we realized was that if you just take a grocery store, kind of medium size or large size grocery store, before we went out and started building anything, we started having a look at the video feed or video feeds, that footage that we had from multiple different retail stores where we deployed other applications to. And we had looked to see when two people come within this 6.5 foot or 7 foot space, we call that a social collision. Not that people are actually smacking into each other, but they're in that same space. And we saw that a little over 80% on average, a little over 80% of these social collisions in a grocery retail context happen at exit, entry, checkout, and other queuing areas. Less than 20% happen in the other wide open areas of, or the majority of the floor space in the grocery store. And if you want to try and measure the distance between people throughout that grocery store, you will need to deploy an awful lot of cameras, because you have to be able to see the whole walkable floor area. And a lot of cameras, quite aside from being very costly, can also be a bit intimidating to the general public as well, if you're just seeing, dome cameras everywhere you go. The other thing that we found out was the duration, the typical duration that these social collisions happen for, or have as a duration. And it's less than 10 seconds. So, if you've got Mike and Mary and they're, in the aisle where they're buying their breakfast cereal, and they both come in within that same 6.5 foot or 7 foot distance, it's going to last for less than 10 seconds. So that leads you on to that point you just mentioned there, Ed, which is, what's the expectation we have for a retailer to be able to do with that information? And it could be the same thing for somebody who's, has commercial office space or manufacturing or construction. What do you do? Like, do you send the SWAT team down to the breakfast cereal aisle to break up Mike and Mary, right? I mean, so it's always like, from our standpoint, when we're developing software, computer vision software, we're always considering, what is it we're looking to detect? What's the level of detectability? And what is the actionability of the information from those detections. And in the case of measuring the distance between people, low accuracy, large number of cameras equals a lot of cost for very little reward and payoff.
Gotcha.
And it sounds cool, right? It sounds cool. Say, hey, we'll do that. It'll be great. And my criticism of that is, as an approach, it is trying to solve a problem 100% through technology,
Right.
as opposed to using a technology where it's a good fit for purpose, and then combining that both with giving human beings a little bit of respect for intelligence, for their own intelligence,
Right.
to make some informed decisions, and then some real kind of non-tech, low-tech ways of helping people figure that situation out. So what we've done in practice is we've deployed cameras at the entrance and exits to to retail stores, and we've done this for a large federal agency in the United States, a large grocery chain in the UK, and this is only in the past 2 weeks because, as you said, it's very new. And what we're doing is, the idea is, how can you remove the additional security guards and retail staff who are at these doors, not just because of the cost for the organization, but that also places those people at additional risk.
Right.
They're and so that idea of diligence and keeping them safe. So we have the cameras. We understand what the maximum safe occupancy can be in a space or a place. So if you know the total square footage, you divide that by 12 meters squared if it's a 6.5 foot space. Let's say you can have 50 people in a store safely. Count the people in and out accurately, and if it's below 50, people can enter. If it's above, they have to wait. And you deploy a really, really simple kiosk tablet computer on a stand at the entrance to the retail store. Green means go, red means stop. That lets the customer, you're empowering that human being to make a decision. Should I enter? Should I not?
Right.
And once you enter, then we are giving the human being, we're crediting them with some intelligence to be able to use some real low-tech techniques like floor measurement stickers. Put a sticker on the floor that shows them what 6.5 feet is, or that can be spaced out with chevrons, whatever the case may be. And we've looked at the video footage. It works.
Yeah.
That absolutely works. So that mixture of high-tech and low-tech really works. Now, an interesting note is staff are not as good as adhering to that as
Really?
customers are.
Oh.
Yeah, and an awful lot of stores are now operating on a one-way traffic system.
Right.
One door in, one door out, and you should walk a certain way down an aisle and not the other way. And it's understandable, it's human nature, but a lot of staff, particularly in grocery retail, right? So you got fast-moving, fast turnover goods. If I can take 2 steps to the left and restock a shelf, as opposed to having to walk all the way down and up an aisle, guess what I'm going to go and do?
You're going to take the 2 steps.
And we've even go through accuracy verification. Where it can be complementary.
Sure. I in the time we got left here, and I really do appreciate Fred, scanning to see Bible.
Question really tall, and anyone who's watching anything, how many people who of your viewers will be watching will have seen some video on social media where you've got a main street or a shopping mall, and you see hundreds of people, and they've got little temperature markers over their head, or little yellow and red lines, and the reality is that when it comes to thermal imaging or temperature detection, it is a good technology if deployed correctly. And what I mean by deployed correctly is in a highly controlled environment. So think about queuing in TSA in airport security, right? Where you can have a camera, and there's even stickers on the ground, put your feet here, look exactly at that point there. You're controlling the measurement, the height, and also really importantly, you have to have a a controllable back plane. In other words, you got to make sure that the temperature that's behind the person is static. We had a retailer asked us, say, hey, we're thinking about using thermal imaging at the entrance to our doors. And we said, okay, you see that big thing that's directly over the door there? They're like, yeah, so that's an air conditioning unit. That completely distorts the thermal background. And there's other simple things. You got to take glasses off. The most accurate place to take a thermal detection through a camera is actually the tear duct. So if you can get a very controlled environment, it's a really good solution. The problem is it is being horribly abused and misused to make a quick buck, and it's being put in places, and it's also not taking account of the fact that I think the last stats I read were something like between 65 or 75 or 70% of individuals who have become infected with COVID can be asymptomatic, and they don't show any temperature change whatsoever. It's also not taking account of the fact of, have I been on my bicycle going to the grocery store? Is my temperature elevated because of that? So really effective in certain situations, but unfortunately, there is a lot of shaky salespeople out there trying to turn a book.
Well, I can imagine. Well, David Owens, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think
Me too.
I think it's important that we, with our viewers and listeners, that we bring people from other places. Like I said, a lot of times we get consumed with what happens here in America, but the reality is COVID is a worldwide. That's why it's called a pandemic. Pan meaning world. It's all around the world, and everybody is trying to deal with this. You guys still have restrictions there in Ireland. I guess they're going to open up some on Monday, a little bit.
That's a Monday, but it's not going to be until mid-August before we're back to some degree of normality. And even then, I think these unusual times, I think it's with us for at least the next 12 months and maybe beyond.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, on a somber note, we end that it may last a long time. But I tell everybody, and I always ask every guest, how are you doing personally? And your family and people around you, are you doing okay? And are you adjusting to this new way of life?
Yeah, Ed, I'm an optimist, right? And I think you worry about the things that are under your control. I've got a really healthy and happy 3-year-old daughter, 5-year-old son, a wife who I love very much, and we're doing well, we're doing good, and we're looking toward better times.
Yeah, me too. So I guess when this is all over, the next time I'm in Dublin, I'll look you up. We'll get a pint and watch some rugby.
We can watch some rugby, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Those boots you're carrying around in your trunk, you can take them over with you.
I'll bring my boots with me, and I'll take a run with the old boys, I guess.
Cool.
Well, David Owens, thank you so much. And everybody, stay right there, David. Everybody, we're going to take a break. When we come back, another Owens is going to be here, Owens Daniels. He's a photographer in Winston-Salem. He has a project called the COVID Photos. And we're going to look at some of his photos and talk about why he did this. The photos are stunning. Everybody has a mask on in the photos, and I think you need to see it. He's based in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So stick around. We'll be right back after this break. And welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark, and we want to thank David Owens from Dublin, Ireland, who was in the last segment with us. I told you we were going to go all over the world if we had to find people who have interesting things going on, not just related to COVID, but I think you should have gotten something out of that segment with David Owens about how technology is changing the way we do things like shop. So in this next segment, I want to talk to Owens Daniels. So I need to make sure I don't get that mixed up. We got two Owens here, but Owens Daniels, he's from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And as you know, we have a relationship with North Carolina Policy Watch. I was out on their website the other day and saw an article about people doing things around the pandemic. And I saw an article about Owens Daniels and his artwork. He's a photographer from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Owens, welcome to The Deal.
Hey, thank you for having me. Hello to your audience.
Well, man, I just read the article, wasn't thinking much of it, and I clicked on the link and it took me to your website, and I was completely blown away by your artwork. Not necessarily the stuff from the COVID stuff, but that's stunning as well. But just your stuff in general. Tell me a bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to the audience and tell them your background a little bit.
Okay, well, my name is Owens Daniels, and I'm the face behind ODP Art and Design, and I'm based in Winston-Salem. I do bold, creative, and innovative portraiture, documentary work, as well as contemporary art. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, so a shout out to Richmond, Virginia. But I've been in North Carolina since about 2005. And the type of artwork that I do basically is twofold. One is basically portraiture, just capturing the likeness of a person. And I do a lot of social messaging work to build that into the portraiture itself, meaning that a lot of times I'll go to the challenges or issues of the day and try to be a voice that's relevant to what's going on now from an artistic standpoint. We call it visual language. And then I would take that language and then I would apply it to individuals or an individual so that we all can kind of hold up a mirror to ourselves and have an idea of the experiences that we experience now, like COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we were coming back from the break, I showed a couple of your pictures, so people get an idea of how stunning your work is. How did you get into photography, and how did you sort of move into that sort of social messaging part of your work? I mean, did you just start out as a regular photographer, maybe, for a job, and then it became more creative? How exactly did you land on doing the work?
It did that way. How I got into photography was through the United States Army. I went in the Army when I was 17 years old. Mm. And they had a school in Fort Belvoir called Cartography School. That's the designing of maps. And you had to take a basic photography course to learn what different parts, the technology of photography. So that's how I got into it. And throughout the years, I started developing my own style of what it is that I wanted to say. And social messaging kind of came natural because I came up through the civil rights movement. I came up when people had skin in the game about their civil rights. Mm-hmm. They had skin in the game about their privileges. They had their skin in the game about being a citizen. So I'm only amplifying that which I've already experienced. We're in a different generation where it's done differently. But actually, if you went back and you looked at Black art, it was very much relevant to the time and the season that it was in to give the community a voice visually.
Right. Right. Well, like I said, it comes through in your work, and I hope people get a chance to see it. And we're going to have I'm going to show some of your pictures, throughout this as well. One of the other things that I want to get to, though, before we run out of time, and I want to remind the folks you're watching The Deal with Ed Clark and our special guest, Owens Daniels. He's from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He's a photographer, a very good photographer, somebody you probably should know. One of the things that I noticed when I was looking through your biography is that, you've been around and your artwork is displayed in places. Tell us where your artwork can be seen, what kind of awards you won and grants and things like that. You're not a new kid on the block.
No, I'm not new at all. My work is in private collections. My work is commissioned. My work is in museums, exhibition galleries. Right now, all of that is shut down. You can't go anywhere to see it but online. I've won grants. I've run artist residencies, all kinds of art calls. As you say, I've been around for a while. And like anything that's been around for a while, I'm experienced and skilled and seasoned. And I bring those skills to the table to try to be, again, a relevant voice for the time and the season that I'm in.
Yeah, let's talk about the particular project that got my interest. Is the Faces from the Pandemic. So in those pictures, and you'll see people with a mask on, and in the collection that you have, they're giving messages to the city of Winston-Salem. How did that come about, and what did you learn from doing that project?
Well, it's a twofold question. I'm gonna answer how it came about. It came about for me that's if I was in Raleigh, or if I was in Winston, if I was in Richmond, where I come from, just seeing the city dying alone by itself, no noise, smells, clutter, empty shops, parking spaces are open, no people. I remember as a kid, and you too young to remember this, but I remember as a kid, we used to be admonished when we were in school to write notes to soldiers or strangers. They were called pen pals.
Mm-hmm.
That's a reminder of a person that they haven't been forgotten. And so I was downtown, and I thought to myself, whether it's Winston or Raleigh, anywhere else, I want the city to know that the citizens haven't forgotten who they are and who that city is to them. And so the notes that you see people are holding up is actually a pen pal note to the city that they live in.
That's a good idea. I mean, I figured that to some degree when I saw it, but that's a good way to approach it. Tell me the second part of it is, what did you kind of learn from it? A lot of this has been political, right? A lot of people are,
Yes.
are trying to force things to be open, and then other people are talking about things need to be closed, and people are saying it has to do with the president. Other people are saying, no, it's only about science or whatever. What about the people in Winston-Salem? How are they feeling about this? And obviously people want to be at work. People don't want to be stressed.
Yeah.
People don't want to be, afraid of dying, but obviously people have emotions in this. What did you learn from the people that you encountered?
I've learned the golden rule: love thy neighbors as love thyself.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned that people are frustrated, people are frightened and afraid, people have anxieties, people are mistrusting authority, they're mistrusting themselves, and I'm finding out people who are on one side or the other, they're trying to reach out to the world and communicate back to the world through those lenses. So when they see a person wear a mask and a person don't wear a mask, a person stay home and a person don't stay home, a person social distance, another one don't social distance, that type of thing, it's like you poking a cage with them. That's their frustration. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I've learned from all of it is that if we would just respect the person, opinion, their opinion, just opinion alone is a good place to start. Mm-hmm. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. That would take us a long way in curing the disease within us. And social distancing is really bringing that out. But that's what I've learned. I've learned that when you look in those pictures and you look into the people's eyes, and that's what I concentrate on, you will see you looking back at you on the other side of that mask.
Mm. Yeah, that's very powerful, Owens, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come in and talk with us. I want to stay in touch with you because I think, like I said, I need to introduce more people to your work, and I believe that this one project, The Faces of the Pandemic, people need to see that, and I'm going to encourage people to go to Owen's website, Owen Daniels Photography, and we'll have a link for all of that for you guys to check that out. And make sure you share this with other people. We have people who watch this program from all over, and hopefully you'll get the attention that you deserve, Owens, because I really was moved by the images that you capture. So hopefully you'll also be willing to come back and talk to us again.
At any time.
Well, folks, if you can hang on for just a second, Owens, if you can hold on for me for just a second. I want to thank, first of all, Val Atkinson. He was in the first segment. Of course, he's always here to talk with us about politics. And then, of course, we had to go all the way to Ireland to get David Owens to come in to talk to us about how technology is being used to combat COVID-19. And of course, we ended up with Owens Daniel from Winston-Salem, a very good artist and somebody you should know. And we're going to try to introduce him to folks here, especially in our audience. And again, Owens, thank you so much for coming in. We'll be back on next weekend, again, with a new episode. During the week, always check the website, thedealwithedclark.com. I'll have a new column out there during the week. Sometimes we'll have special things during the week on Tuesday or Wednesdays if we have time to do another episode. It depends on what the news cycle is like. But in the meantime, like I always tell you to do something nice for somebody this week. That's all we ask. Come back with us next weekend and be the deal. And obviously we'll have exciting people like we always do, like Owens Daniels. Thanks for watching.